and welcome. You're watching the Week in Review on QTV, and I'm your host, Ade Darami. And as ever, we go through some stories from the week that's just passed, and about 10 stories we try and get through, myself and a guest. And my very special guest this week is Sam Sarr, who is editor of Foroya newspaper. Sam, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming along. And for anyone who's joining and watching this for the very first time, what happens is we'll play a video and then we'll discuss the stories in some detail. So please stay with us and let's get cracking with the very first story. This video will show you a bit about what happened with some migrants who were killed during the previous regime. Have a look at this.
Interest to Gambians and deem it fitting to clear the air. He also made it clear they will not be pressured into taking any course of action other than what they already planned to do. In July 2019, 3 soldiers who were part of the junglers told the TRRC that they participated in the unlawful killings of the Ghanaians and other West African migrants and the orders of Yahya Jammeh. Finally, the TRRC has announced that it will grant the Ghanaian family's request to appear before its hearings into the incident, which is expected to start at the end of December.
And there you heard my colleague Babakar C there talking about the migrants, but principally the Ghanaians who were killed here in the Gambia. Sam, you were around reporting. What are your own memories of it before we get to this whole thing about whether the TRRC should actually look into the matter?
At the time when it actually occurred, the information was scanty.
Sure.
And people were afraid to speak. But we did write something about it, but we could not go into details because we could not verify some of the information that we had. And at the time also, there were no spokesperson who would actually dare to come out and say anything and clarify issues. So this thing just went under the carpet, and subsequently the Ghanaian government was trying to intervene to get the Jammeh government to do something. Later on, diplomacy crept in, and the thing also went under the carpet again. But eventually, with TRRC, it is surfacing.
Indeed, yes. I mean, you mentioned the TRRC there. I mean, what the families were saying is that they want the TRRC to investigate this. And the TRRC is saying it is on their list of things, but they have to take their time. What's been your own sense of how the TRRC has conducted its business since its inception?
Well, this TRRC was established for a particular purpose. We've gone through many years of human rights violations and human rights abuse, and the issue of transformative justice came into the fore after the December 2nd election, that it is necessary to really dig out all these violations and actually come up with recommendations as to how we move on from there. And that's the whole issue of the TRRC. And that is why it is spelled out in the Act as creating a historical record of all the violations, tracing their sources, the extent of the violations, and so on and so forth. So in that regard, and this one was a major issue.
Indeed,
yes. Yes, because we have 56 people being slaughtered, allegedly, then that needs to be dealt with. There is the option of prosecution, but TRRC takes a different route.
Indeed, yes. I mean, in Sierra Leone we've had our own truth and reconciliation as well. Yes.
and they interested more in digging out the facts and then pursuing the issue of healing and so on and so forth.
Yes, because they have both reconciliation and reparations in theirs, which is different to most other.
Well, most don't have reparations,
Indeed.
but this one does.
That's right, most don't, yes. I mean, a question I will ask everybody since I came to the Gambia and moved here is that, and you've sort of hinted at it, about the lack of information that would have been coming from government. Have some of the revelations shocked you that have come through the TRRC?
Not really, because we were aware of a lot of them.
Right.
And we had reporters, some of whom have actually testified.
Sure.
They were assigned to go to the families, the police stations, and various places to investigate and find out the truth of those allegations.
Sure.
But it was very difficult because sometimes the families themselves are afraid.
Indeed, yeah.
And would hesitate to speak to reporters, even anonymously. And some went to the extent of being hostile because they'll get out of this place. Really? You want to create
they
problems.
Didn't give room.
Exactly.
Yes.
It used to happen. So we had all this information, and we used, if we verify, we cross-check and verify any information, then we just go ahead and publish, because NIA would not actually comment. And we've been doing this over and over again, and since maybe 2004 or so.
Sure.
But there has never been any arrest or prosecution of any of the paper or any reporter for the allegations which have been published. Yes. So therefore all these revelations don't actually surprise me.
And just in closing this particular discussion, if you had to give sort of marks out of 10, I know it's a bit unfair to the TRRC for how it's conducted and what it's revealed, what mark would you give it?
Well, marks I'm not sure. But I would feel that sometimes I'm not too pleased with the line of questioning. Because it's like it's like cross-examination.
It becomes adversarial.
Yes. And what you are interested in is revealing the facts.
Sure.
And your investigation should be such that you have so much overwhelming evidence to really, through questioning,
just corroborate.
Yes. So the questioning should be such as to encourage more people to come, because what you are interested in is not prosecution, but to get the facts out so that people will be able to speak.
Thank you for that. And as it says, that's why it has the word truth in its name. But thank you for that, Sam. Now, on to another matter, and this is to do with you and I as journalists and reporting on tax matters. Have a look at this video.
Our major problem is having a voluntary tax compliance. And if we have the compliance level higher, it makes life easy for us as tax collectors. And at the same time, government will also be happy, because that means more revenue. And in doing that, we cannot do it alone. We need the involvement of everybody, more particularly the media.
I wanted to end on that note. He said more particularly the media.
Yes.
He talks about the fact that people sort of self-regulate their tax affairs. Is that workable, firstly, before we go on to the role that the media can play in a society where there's not a lot of connectivity in terms of, tax records being kept electronically? How viable is it?
Well, the problem is the state of the economy. and as well as the nature of the economy, because it's a tax-based economy. So revenue is based mainly on collection of taxes.
Yeah.
The government does not engage in productive ventures. It's saying that it's private sector led growth, but that is not working.
No.
So collecting taxes then becomes very difficult when people try to live from hand to mouth.
Indeed.
There are some, of course, who have the capacity to pay taxes regularly, but they normally flatly refuse or try to evade.
That's right.
But there are many others who really are living from hand to mouth, and it makes it difficult. So long as the economy is tax-based and at the same time is not performing well, they will continue to. They try very hard, very well, especially the Commissioner General.
Indeed.
They do their utmost,
yes.
But it's the state of affairs.
Yes, I mean, and so I come to his plea there for the media to play, you know, because he put it specifically on the media as the role. What is the role that you would see the media as doing in trying to get people to sort of not only pay or comply and so on? What's our role?
Well, when somebody has a noble intention, is to encourage the person to continue with that. And yes, one would encourage the media to actually do their utmost in letting people know the importance
of having to pay
their taxes, because that's what the government depends on. But as I said, we also take into consideration the nature and the state of the economy.
Sure. Thanks for that, Sam. And my own, I had a discussion with some friends around this because I knew we were going to be discussing it. And, you know, I was talking about things like all these informal garages that just spring up along the way. People go, they get their car fixed. It's all cash transactions. Nothing is recorded. And most of those don't pay tax.
Yes. It's an informal economy.
Very much so, yes. So, yes, I know you've thrown it to the media, but I think you're giving us a very, very tough job to try and get people to comply, but we'll try our best. Now, on to something else. COVID-19, you know, I always hope to go through this program without ever mentioning COVID-19, but I think this year will be impossible. And it's impacted the tourism sector particularly hard. And so have a look at this, and you'll see something, just a clip from the Minister of Tourism.
Among the places he visited on Sunday was the Mongo Park Memorial Obelisk in Samek, Karantaba, where he was briefed by National Center for Arts and Culture officials on plans to construct a perimeter fence to protect the site, the Kunkiling Forest project site, which is under construction, the Musa Molo tomb, where officials revealed plans to also construct a perimeter fence as well as renovate the site, and the Sotuma Resort, which is also under construction.
Mongo Park site, lots of other sites. Sam, the Minister has said time and time again in recent weeks about the fact he wants to encourage internal tourism because obviously the economy has been quite badly hit. How realistic do you think that is?
Well, again, that's a noble idea. The reality is that only few people in the Gambia will have the ability to travel elsewhere in the country to go on holiday. The tendency, if they have a little, they are thinking of paying school fees for their brothers, their cousins, etc. Or they go and visit their family who they have not seen for a year, where if they go, they'll spend less because they don't have to spend on food and other items. They just pay their fares, go and come back. With internal tourism, it's necessary, but one has to build the economy. If you have a large middle class, even not that large, but significant number of people, then they can engage in that as a means of encouraging internal tourism. So I will not discourage him from that doing so, but it's a challenge for the tourism ministry.
I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the things, and I also encourage what he's trying to do, because in other countries, in Europe, for example, there is, you know, a kind of internal tourism as well as external. You know, a lot of the people who come here, the majority are from Europe. But a lot of them also visit heritage sites within their own countries because those sites are kept well and they are promoted well. And I think there's been a failure to kind of promote them within the country, and that's what's sort of coming back to bite us, really.
Yes, with regard to heritage sites, I don't think the issue should only be economical. It's also historical. And it's important that they be preserved for various reasons, for cultural, for historical, and economic reasons. It's a good beginning. Then few Gambians go there. Maybe every year the number will increase as time goes on, as the economy thrives better. But there are also important records as to what happened at particular moments in our history, which we need to learn.
I 100% agree with Sam there, and anybody who knows me knows that this is very much my passion. So we'll take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we've got 3 more stories, so don't go away.
QTV is ending this year with December Marketplace. Grab the opportunity to showcase your business at your location at an affordable price. Take us and the audience through your shop and talk about your products on our special Marketplace platform. QTV Marketplace is a commercial spot within our prime time. You know what that means. Larger audience, wider reach. It is that time of the year where visibility guarantees high sales, so you can't afford to miss out. Participate in the marketplace. Call us on 32444 or send us an email at marketing@qtv.gm.
Welcome back. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm your host, Ari Darami, and my special guest is Sam Sarr, editor of the Foroya newspaper. And if you have just joined us, well, you've already missed 3 stories, but don't go away. There are 7 more to go, so you're in luck. Now, the next story is one that intrigued. I dropped out as a law student, so I never qualified as a lawyer, and I always appreciate those who did. My father was a lawyer. Have a look at this, and then when we come back, we'll discuss some more. Just have a look at this video.
Usman Kujabi spoke on behalf of the new legal practitioners.
Today, we are confirmed fit and proper by the General Legal Council to practice law within the jurisdiction of the Gambia. And as the Honorable Chief Justice has said, we must be guided by 2 things: honesty and integrity. These are the core values, I believe, that the legal profession is built upon.
Honesty, integrity. Sam, you heard the young man there talking about it. Before we come, let's pick up on his words there. The legal profession has taken a bit of a battering in terms of people's confidence in it. Since I've come here, you know, I hear people saying that, oh, you know, these people are crooked and so on. Do they need to do more to address those sorts of concerns?
Well, I think those 2 words are extremely important in the legal profession. Well, not of late. whether it's because it's becoming less or not.
Sure.
But in the past, we've had many reports of litigants complaining of lack of prosecution of their cases by their attorneys.
Sure.
And some even claim that their attorneys have duped them. And of late, there have been, the complaints are mainly coming from, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the other courts,
sure.
but the complaints are mostly in the industrial tribunal.
Right, right.
Because when you are employed, the industrial tribunal was created to expedite cases.
Indeed, yes.
But we are aware of many cases which have been in the industrial tribunal for years. If, for example, I'm an employee of a company and I'm wrongfully dismissed, and I have to stay for 2 years without having justice, that's a big disadvantage.
Without justice and a job.
Yes, yes. Because I need to know my fate within a few weeks rather than 2 years. For example, if you take the Kanifing Industrial Tribunal, at the moment, it's not sitting.
Sure.
And there is still no clear information as to why it is not sitting, because that could not be explained by court officials at the Kanifing Magistrates Court, and we are yet to get clear information at the Office of the Chief Justice. So the system itself has to also be looked into, as well as the performance of lawyers. And I'll extend it a little bit. We do have a lot of cases of human rights violations, but we lack lawyers who are willing to volunteer.
To go into that, yes, yes. Pro bono.
Pro bono.
Yes, yes.
Seriously lacking. So some people just suffer unnecessarily.
Right, right. Yeah, okay. I mean, one of the reasons I was interested in this is, as I said, I dropped out of law school, so I've always had an interest in the profession. But also, I'd done some programs here on Q Radio where they were talking about the backlog in the courts, and they were saying, amongst other things, you know, they didn't have enough, you know, qualified lawyers and so on. And yet, when I looked at the role, you know, the people who sort of did law at university, the numbers seem to be going up, and the numbers who were being enrolled as lawyers seem to be going up, and yet we still were hearing that there were these unbelievable backlogs in the courts. And you've mentioned the industrial tribunals and the problems they're having. Is this going to help inevitably? You know, 38 new legal practitioners are now, you know, let loose?
Well, let us hope so. You know, lawyers, well, there are two things. One, because you've gone through the course. First, you have to have the degree. You have to know the law. Sure. But there's also the legal practice. So some tend to go to convenient places, like in-house lawyers for a particular company, because you'll have regular high income,
of course,
and then being a magistrate or an advocate, legal practitioner.
Sure.
So maybe I have not done any survey or investigation. Maybe that is also playing a part, that most of the companies are seeing the need to hire a lawyer. Like QCell may feel that, well, we need 2 or 3 in-house lawyers. They call them in, and rather than these lawyers going for advocacy,
I mean,
and appearing in court, they are
Yes, I mean, because it's a wide field.
Yes.
And in the UK, for example, and I'll ask you this directly because you're editor of a newspaper. Does the newspaper have its own lawyer? Because every newspaper in the UK has several lawyers, not just one or two. But does Foroya have its own lawyer?
No, we don't.
No,
we
can't afford it. Exactly. so I think on that note, we'll move on to the next one. There's been a lot of talk about security sector reform. Thank you, Sam, for that. And have a look at this clip, and we'll come back and we'll discuss it.
The security sector reform process was launched by President Barrow in 2017 and subsequently the National Security Policy in May 2019, and saw a solid foundation and serve as the overarching national strategy document in the Gambia's pursuit of our national security. At the launch, the National Security Advisor Mamadou Badji said there cannot be sustainable development without stable, effective and democratically accountable security institutions, adding that national documents were developed through consultations with all stakeholders.
The sectorial strategies will include national defense policy, the military strategy and the internal security strategy respectively, border management strategy, counter-terrorism strategy, cybersecurity, and information and communication technology strategy, which will culminate with sensor strategy.
Lots of strategies mentioned there, and the cynical side of me thinks some of it is necessary, it's needed, and it's likely to happen because of the recent past of our history, and holding people accountable to account. But then I hear about, counterterrorism. I hear about cybersecurity. Are we just paying lip service to some of these things because we think we ought to?
Yes, I think it's been quite a long time now, about 3 years. I don't think.
Yeah, it's 2017 to now.
When they started, when it was launched, that was what was actually anticipated. And still there is no conclusion.
Sure.
As far as I'm concerned, what matters most about security is that the security forces are democratic minded and observe the rule of law. And in incidents involving public order, they respect lives of individuals and use the minimum force necessary to keep the crowd under control. For me, that's the most significant. What is also significant is that people act spontaneously sometimes and get out of the way where there is so much injustice being meted against them. So ensuring democracy, good governance, and the rule of law, once that is properly done, it would be if anybody who wants to create problems, say, oh, you are creating problems, you want to bring instability in the country. So they can continue with their strategies and policies, but let them try to simplify it so that people can digest and ensure that these are observed, that the security respects lives of people.
That's it. Thank you, Ham, for that. And I think those are very, very wise words indeed. And now I said a few minutes back that I'd love one day to do a program, this program, without mentioning COVID-19. It's an impossibility in 2020. But this one is to do with COVID-19 vaccines. Have a look at this.
Some African countries have decided what they cannot afford is to wait for a handout from anyone. To this end, a network of 13 African countries has joined forces with global researchers to launch the largest clinical trial of potential COVID-19 treatments on the continent. It is called the Anti-Cove study and involves Antwerp's Institute of Tropical Medicine and 12 other international research institutions from various countries. In addition to the 13 African countries, there are 26 partners involved. These non-African partners are from Switzerland, Spain, Germany, France and Belgium.
Sam, Anti-Cove,
Yes.
I chose that for a particular reason, because there have been talks about Pfizer and some other companies, you know, Pfizer in Germany, launching as soon as in 2 weeks' time. They would actually start giving out the vaccine because they said 95% efficacy. But a lot of the discussion in the West, when they mention Africa, has been, will they be able to afford it and so on. And the reason I chose this is because it shows that at least 13 African countries are not waiting for the West to say, you know, if you can't afford it, we'll help you out, we'll buy it for you. They're trying to make their own. What's your view on that?
Well, that should be, it's a bold move, and it should be supported. You know, there have been so many instruments, treaties, protocols which have been signed involving the setting up of a bank for the whole of Africa, a monetary fund, and so many other instruments.
Likewise, yes.
But the problem is implementation. Those have not been applied. We can achieve a lot if we join hands and put our heads together. Africa cannot really move forward by relying on outside forces. Okay, we have to join hands together and use our brains. We have the talents. We have people who can do it. And I think this is a bold move that requires support.
And what was pleasing that you saw the Kenyan doctor, there was a screenshot of her, and the text said, you know, this is research by Africans for Africans. You know, a very bold statement to make, and it's kind of telling the world that actually, as you just said, we have the talents, we have the brains. Why are we sitting back, you know, waiting for, you know, even in America now, they've mentioned that 2 of the doctors that have led the leading vaccine, they're Nigerians, but they're now based in America. So, you know, and as you rightly say, you know, we've had all these highfalutin notions of, you know, African sort of cooperation, you know, the whole Pan-African agenda, which most of us support and buy into, but the reality has been miles away. But COVID-19 is a sort of current and present danger. Do you think that is why this is somehow it's different, this kind of cooperation? It's not just another talk, another treaty, as you say?
Well, I think it's a practical move by professionals and together with governments that have actually seen the need for it. Let's hope we'll have more of it. And for it to expand to higher heights so that we can, because if we can, for example, have a dam somewhere in Guinea, it can serve all these countries. And then you have something else where another country, because that's how America does. It has resources in one state, those resources are utilized in other states.
And my hope for this is that if it succeeds, it will serve as a template to show Africans that yes, we can come together, we can do these things, and you know, we have the brains, we have the talent, and so on. And
it's really a move that needs to be supported.
Yes, indeed.
Because it's not done by one state, but a group of
well, this is it, a group of them, they've come together, and nobody's saying, you know, you're not from this region or that region. And when you look at the 13 African countries, it's across the continent. It's not a kind of West African or East African. It's quite a broad sweep. So I'm hopeful, and sounds as if you are too. Okay. Thanks for that, Sam. And now on to something else, which you know, when I started coming to the Gambia, I would go to Banjul and I would think to myself, gosh, this is the capital city. Have a look at this, and you know why I used to think like that.
President Barrow said $35.6 million Banjul project, pre-financed by the contractor, Gay Construction, is another milestone towards the realization of government's development agenda as set out in the National Development Plan and the Sustainable Development Goals.
Everybody is seeing the project now. I think the project speaks for itself. This is a project that is important, not for Banjul alone, but for the Gambia. Banjul is our capital city. We cannot afford to ignore Banjul. That's why it's a very expensive project. I need the support of everybody, especially Banjulians.
His Excellency the President saying that we cannot afford to ignore Banjul. And as I said in the intro to that, I was quite shocked because most countries, the capital city actually would be the one they would spend the most money and the most development on. So why did we neglect Banjul to that extent?
Well, I believe with the overcrowding that was occurring in Banjul and people who made it in terms of wealth, who can afford it, move. Like if you take a family of living in a particular compound, after one generation, a second generation, the place becomes overcrowded in Banjul. The tendency is that either the younger ones or some of them, or they may even decide to sell the compound and purchase some other compounds in the combos and go and live there. That's really what has happened. So Banjul became neglected. And since it's the major port in the Gambia, the port area kept extending and depriving people of residence. So most of them are now scattered in the half-die area. There's an area called half-die.
I know
so they're moving. And the development has not been taking place, really. So development is good, and it's good they build those roads, etc. My only question is the process that was pursued. You invite a businessman, a contractor who volunteers to construct the road and then charge you. So for me, is that really the way we should operate a government?
And is that really volunteering? Because I did see the piece and I couldn't get my head around it, that in fact what you've just described is what they said happened, that this business kind of, but they're then going to get paid for it. They're not doing it for free.
Of course. So when actually the normal procedure which is required is you have this major tender board. You have GPPA, and these things should be processed through there. It should be advertised. Then there is tender, and you actually select who is going to do the project. But now it's putting the cart before the horse.
And as you rightly said, we tend to see these sorts of tenders in the newspapers. So why was it not done in this instance? I wonder. But that aside, is this a good move in terms of what we've seen? I mean, from what I've seen, I was quite impressed, I have to say. Or maybe I'm easily impressed, I don't know. But actually it seemed to be the quality of the work seemed to be of a high standard.
Yes, from a layperson's point of view, the road seems to be good, but you know, it's not only the quality of the road that is constructed that needs to be taken into account, is how much it is going to cost the taxpayer. That's also needs to be taken into account. And information is not too clear yet as to whether
what the cost will be.
The cost is too high or it's too low.
And the dreaded M word, maintenance. As Sam says, a layman like myself, we can go look at a road and say, gosh, this is really impressive. A year or two down the line, has it been maintained, and so on. And that's equally important. So let's take another quick commercial break. And when we come back, we'll have 3 more stories. Don't go away. Welcome back, and after that quick commercial break, and if you're just joining us, you have missed 7 stories, but hey, it's not the end of the program. We've got 3 more, so you're in luck. And my guest this week is Sam Saar, editor of Foroya newspaper. Sam, this one, I think, you and I had discussions, and from those discussions, I suspect you are somebody to whom education means a lot. Have a look at this clip, and when we come back, we'll delve into the particular and then the more general discussion on education in the Gambia.
However, the school is constrained by a lack of seat and space, forcing them to operate double shifts. Lamin Sanyang is the principal.
Some of our main problems are the fencing of the school. And at the same time, teachers are living in different areas of the community, and which is not conducive at all. And water also is a problem here, because the water that we are using, we are paying for it. It belongs to the community. So we really appreciate if you can have our own in a borehole, whereby it will be our own. There will be nothing like paying for water.
You heard a principle there, Sam. I was saying about importance of education. The surroundings in which one has to learn matter a lot. Now, during the 5-month or 6-month lockdown, whatever it was, we knew that at some point schools would have to return.
Yes.
We talk about sanitation and so on, and yet we look at those pictures. It doesn't seem as if any preparation was done for the return of students. Why is that, do you think?
Why is that? I cannot explain. But there should have been adequate preparation. It's not only a means of hand wash and face masks, but the environment itself must be hygienic enough for the students to operate in order to protect their health.
Indeed.
We have for a long time now been attending overcrowded schools. And the government has not yet moved away from that. Then COVID-19 struck. And I don't know what kept them for so long for not reopening school, whether it was merely the COVID-19 or lack of preparation to resume classes. Because if you are going to resume classes, you have to respect
social distancing,
and all
those sorts of things.
Yes. And the implication of that is you can only accommodate fewer students. Unfortunately, some schools were operating two shifts. And how do you handle that when you have 2 shifts and you have overcrowding? So it's a real problem, and it's also important that this is general information for the population and the schools authorities to understand that COVID-19 is still a reality. It has not gone. Some people have assumed because of announcement of less deaths that it's gone. It's still a reality.
Still a reality, of course.
And they should get the students, because you go to most schools, students don't put on face masks. Or if they put on the face mask, they pull it down the chin. And so on. Some do not even, they just pass the container for hand, without any hand wash.
Sure.
So it's still a reality, and they should realize that. But you see, education is extremely important, because you are investing for the future.
Absolutely.
And you are talking about us using our brains, using our skills in order to develop our country. And for that to be possible, we must start it at the beginning, when the child is very young, in his or her formative years. And such being the case, there is need to review the whole setup in the education to ensure that the quality that they talk about, the accessibility and affordability are attained, without which development will be a quagmire.
Thanks for that, Sam. And I think I would add to that the relevance of the education that we're getting. How relevant is it to our development? So thank you for that. And now on to something else. In Africa, we're used to hearing about disputed elections and people taking presidents to court and so on, and election monitors coming in and saying an election was fair or it was unfair. Now America seems to be copying Africa. What am I talking about? Well, of course, President Trump. But although he seems to be on his way out, he still has found time to have another dig at Africa. Have a look at this.
The visa bond rule will now require potential visitors to pay a refundable bond of $5,000, $10,000 or $15,000. The African countries targeted are Angola, Burkina Faso, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Eritrea, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Libya, Mauritania, Sudan, Sao Tome and Principe, Cabo Verde, Burundi.
We're talking about the visa bond rule there in America, and as you heard in the list of countries, the Gambia is one of the countries that's going to be affected by this. Now, when you look at in sheer numbers, okay, there are countries in Europe that they don't need a visa necessary to go to America, but you say, I'm going there for a period of time. They say Gambia has a more than 10% overstay rate. If I were to ask most Gambians, do you know how many Gambians overstayed in America in 2019? They probably never guess. It was 220. Okay. From the UK, 16,000 people overstayed in 2019 in America. From France, it was 14,000. And from Spain, it was 10,000. He's not asking them to pay. So what do you think is behind what some people see as just a kind of nasty gesture against countries that are not in a state to be able to protest about it? What's the thinking? And as I said, he's on his way out as well.
Well, he's on his way out.
Possibly.
Well, he is on his way out. I believe this emphasizes still the need for us, because people go to America for two main reasons. One for greener pastures, and the other is for education. Let us develop our continent. Let us join hands together. Let us develop our intellectual base and try to develop an Africa which will be second to no other continent. It is possible, and we should strive for it. With that, we gain dignity. We'll be able to meet the challenges of the world. So long as you become dependent, these are the sort of things which just keep happening.
The indignities that we have to put up with.
Yes.
And you know.
So if people want, they can
Yeah.
I wouldn't say don't protest, they can protest, but for me, this rings a bell.
Yeah, sure. Yes. It's a kind of wake-up call to us, isn't it? That, and I was in Ghana last year, and I was quite impressed that 5 American universities have actually opened campuses in Ghana, and what they tell you is that the quality of education you get there will be as good as if you went to America, and 3 universities from the United Kingdom have done the same in Ghana, which shows you that, you know, they sort of respect. And when I went to one of the schools, I was very impressed. I was seriously impressed. And as you rightly say, Sam, I think, you know, we need to get our dignity back, and the only way is to start looking after ourselves in that way. So thank you for that. So, Mr. Trump, you know, this might be the last order you sign, but who knows? And now on to something else, which when we were talking about security sector, Sam sort of touched on it. Well, this one is about public order management training. Have a look at this.
Over the past few years, the Gambia has witnessed a more open environment that has allowed citizens to exercise their constitutional right to freedom of assembly, with a few sparking violent confrontation between civilian demonstrators and the police, leading to injuries and loss of lives. This support and other capacity building initiatives have the potential to change the narrative.
You know, Sam, it's funny how the news has a habit of overtaking things. One of the reasons why I chose this story was that across Africa, the police dealing with people protesting, whatever, tend to go overboard and over the top. But just 2 days ago, an incident happened. A record producer in France, who happened not to be wearing a mask, was severely beaten by 3 policemen who've now been suspended. It's led even to the president making a statement and saying he's horrified, he's shocked. But in those countries, they might say that's a rarity. However, in our part of the world, in Africa, the police overstepping the mark and so on is more common. This kind of training, yes, it's good and they can tick a box, but how long, I know it's a ridiculous question, before it becomes embedded in the culture of the police that their role is not to crack open the heads of people peacefully protesting?
I believe you hit the nail on the head. It should be the culture within the police force itself to respect the rights of citizens as well as their lives.
Sure.
So when people are protesting, don't see it as an unruly set of people, bunch of people just trying to create.
Sure.
They're exercising their right.
Is that right?
So long as they are not violent
and
they do not assault any individual, allow them to shout out their heads. It's their right which they are exercising. Some may see it as unnecessary, but it's their right that they actually do so. And so long as they keep the peace, you should not interfere. And you should not unnecessarily bar them from exercising that particular right. Furthermore, if at all they are going beyond the bounds of law and you have to intervene, you should use the minimum force necessary to maintain order. And not just come as an assailant, attacking and beating and snatching, shooting with live bullets, arresting journalists, beating of journalists.
Well, this is it. Yes. I mean, and as I said, you know, and I was sort of asking the question deliberately because here in the Gambia, even after the previous regime has gone, there have been instances when the police have overstepped that mark. And really, as you said, it needs to become part of the culture. It needs to be every day.
And, you know, after the incidents, in most instances, they will just indicate that it's being investigated. But we are yet to see any outcome of such investigation, any action taken to preempt such developments from the occur.
Yeah, I mean, in the West, people feel no fear about challenging an officer who's overstepping the mark. They can look at your badge, they can report you, and there's a possibility you'll get disciplined and reprimanded severely, and possibly even sacked. Is that something we also need to educate the populace about their rights?
Yes, the people need to know their rights, and the government also need to not only pass laws defending their rights, but to go the extra mile to ensure that those rights are protected. And that's what, in fact, the Constitution says, that the role of government is to ensure that the rights of its citizens, their human rights, are protected.
I mean, do you see the day when an African president will come out and say to his or her citizens, it is your right to protest, even against me? Do you see that? Because in Uganda, we see people being arrested just for protesting, even when it's a peaceful protest. Do you see that day?
I do see the day in which people will exercise those rights and impose it on their will on the government. It just depends on the level of development. Before 2016, there were problems of people protesting. There were problems of people even expressing themselves.
Indeed.
But now that is a thing of the past. So that is the first level. But the second level requires awareness creation. That means people must become aware of their rights. They must also be confident that their rights can be protected and be able to move ahead.
I have to stop you there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm always telling my guests that time is our enemy and we've run out of time. So Sam, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
And to our viewers, as always, I always say thank you for watching. You've been watching QTV and you've been watching the Week in Review with me, Adedarimi, and my very special guest, Sam Sarr. Join us again next week for another edition. But for now, thanks for watching and goodbye.